Imagine you wake up at 2 a.m. Your village is quiet, the night is still. And then, from somewhere deep in the forest behind your house, you hear a child crying. Not a sound carried on the wind, not something you are imagining. A child, clearly, crying. Coming from a forest that everyone in your community knows no child goes into after dark. You lie still. You do not go to investigate. Because in Eket, in the deep south of Nigeria, you have been told since you were young what that sound means. And what it means is, someone in your household is going to die within 3 days. The Eket people of Eket are among the oldest inhabitants of southern Nigeria, part of the broader Ibibio nation, one of the most ancient ethnic groups on the continent. They have lived on this land since at least 7000 BC. Long before any European drew a map of West Africa, the Eket had already mapped the world in a different way, through the relationship between the living, the dead, and the forest that connects them. In Ibibio belief, a person carries two souls. The first is the Ukpong, the immortal soul that belongs to the world of the ancestors. The second is the Ukpong Ikot, the bush soul, the soul that lives in the forest, the soul that can take the shape of a wild animal, a leopard, a python, an antelope, and move between the human world and the spirit world through the trees. The forest, in this understanding, is not empty. It has never been empty. It is where the other half of every living person spends its time. When someone dies among the Ibibio people, their soul enters what is called Obio Ekpo, the world of the dead. If the proper ceremonies are performed, the soul passes through cleanly and rests with the ancestors. But if the ceremonies are not performed, if the dead are dishonored, abandoned, or if they died in a way the community considers unclean, the soul cannot enter Obio Ekpo. It becomes what the Ibibio call Ekpo Onyon, a ghost, homeless, wandering, doomed to move through the earth forever, and most often, it moves through the forest. The Ekpo Society, the great secret society of the Ibibio, exists partly to manage this boundary, to keep the dead where they belong, to perform the ceremonies that allow the departed to cross over, and to warn the living when something on the other side is trying to cross back. The crying in the forest is, in the Eket understanding, exactly that warning. The accounts from Eket follow the same pattern regardless of which family is telling them, regardless of which part of the Eket region they come from, regardless of what decade they are describing. It always begins the same way. The dead of night, usually between midnight and 3 a.m. in the deepest part of the darkness, a sound rising from the forest, a child crying, not distantly, clearly. Close enough that the first instinct of anyone who hears it is to go and help. And that is the most important part of what the elders teach. You do not go toward the sound. Not because it is dangerous to your body, because going toward it will not find you anything. The sound has no location. It has no source. Search parties have gone into those forests the next morning. They find nothing. No tracks, no disturbed undergrowth, no sign that any child, any living creature, was there at all. The sound exists. The source does not. The window is always 3 days. That is what the accounts consistently describe. From the night the crying is heard to the death that follows, 3 days. Sometimes it is an elderly person whose health had already been fragile. Sometimes it is someone whose death arrives with no warning at all. A sudden illness. An accident that should not have been fatal. A person who was healthy at breakfast and gone by evening. The Eket do not interpret this as a curse. That distinction matters. The crying is not believed to cause the death. It is believed to announce it. The soul that is about to leave, or a spirit that already knows the boundaries about to shift, sends the sound ahead like a messenger, a warning, a preparation. In a culture where proper mourning, proper ceremony, and proper passage of the dead are considered essential, not just religiously but practically, for the safety of the living, an announcement of 3 days is a gift. Time to prepare. Time to say what needs to be said. Time to make sure the ceremonies will be ready. The forest does not taunt. It informs. What makes the crying forest accounts impossible to simply set aside is not their age, Old stories exist everywhere. What makes them difficult is their consistency across people who had no reason to coordinate their testimonies. Families in different parts of the Ekit region, separated by miles of forest and river, with no shared media, no shared religious institution reinforcing the story, describe the same thing in the same terms. The sound is always at night. It is always unmistakably a child. It always comes from the forest and never from a direction that can be fixed. It never repeats on the same night. And the death always follows within 3 days, never before and never significantly after. Community leaders in the region have not, as far as records show, ever launched an investigation. Not because they dismiss it, but because there is nothing to investigate. The pattern is accepted the way sunrise is accepted, as something that happens, as something that has always happened, as something the land does. In Ibibio tradition, not all forest is the same. There are ordinary forests, farmland borders, palm groves, the spaces between communities that people walk through daily. And then there is what is called the bad bush. The bad bush is where those who cannot enter Obio Ekpo are sent. In the old traditions, if a person died in a way considered spiritually unclean, victims of certain diseases, people who committed crimes against the community, those whose deaths were sudden and unwitnessed, their bodies were not buried in the family compound. They were taken to the bad bush, left there. So their restless souls would be contained in a place already understood to be the domain of the wandering dead. This is not mythology. British colonial officers recorded the practice in Ibibio communities in the late 1800s. It was real. The bad bush was real. And the belief that the wandering dead, the Ekpo Onyon, inhabited those places was not superstition. It was, in the Ibibio understanding, ecology, a careful management of where the restless dead were permitted to be. The forests around Ekit have held the restless dead for a very long time. There is a question that sits at the center of this account that has never been fully answered, even within the Ekit tradition itself. Why a child's voice? The elders offer different explanations depending on who you ask. Some say a child's cry is the sound most likely to cross the threshold between worlds, that it carries a frequency neither fully of this world nor the next, and so it travels the boundary most easily. Some say the sound reflects the soul of the person who is about to die, returning briefly to the moment of their own birth, the last innocent state before the weight of life accumulated, as a kind of farewell. Others say something simpler and perhaps more unsettling, that the wandering dead in the forest choose the sound most likely to make a living person come toward them, not out of malice, out of loneliness. The restless dead want to be acknowledged. A crying child is the sound no living person can resist. And so the first instruction every elder gives is the hardest one. Do not go toward it. Acknowledge it in your heart. Begin your preparations, but do not go toward the sound. Whatever is there does not need you to find it. In every account that includes a morning search, and there are several, the result is the same. Nothing. The forest at the tree line shows no sign of disturbance. The undergrowth is undisturbed. The soft earth, which would hold even a light animal's tracks in the morning damp, holds nothing. There are no human footprints leading in or out. No broken branches at a child's height. No sign that anything with physical form moved through those trees in the night. This is the part that the rational mind keeps returning to, because it is the part that refuses every comfortable explanation. If it were an animal, a small primate, a baby's cry carried by a bird, there would be something. A track, a movement, something in the branches. But the Ekit accounts describe a forest that is completely physically undisturbed at the place the sound came from, as if whatever made the sound left no impression on the physical world at all, as if it was never in the physical world to begin with. Let me give you the rational case, because it deserves to be stated. Several species of primate found in Nigerian forests produce calls that in certain conditions, heard through walls, through sleep, through the distortion of night air, can sound remarkably like a human infant crying. The tree hyrax, found in West African forests, is well documented for producing screams at night that disturb even experienced naturalists with their human quality. Acoustic conditions near dense forest can distort the direction and distance of sounds in ways that make location genuinely impossible even for trained listeners. And confirmation bias is real. When a community believes a sound predicts death, every death that follows any unusual nighttime sound in any 3-day window will be remembered. Every sound that does not lead to a death will be forgotten or reclassified. These are fair things to say. I say them honestly. But the accounts from Eket describe a sound with no directional source, in a forest that shows no physical trace of any animal the next morning, across families who did not know each other's accounts, in a pattern so consistent that it is taught to children not as warning, but as knowledge. The rational frame holds up until you push on it. Then it has the same problem it always has in places like this. It explains what it can reach. It cannot reach the bottom of this one. There is something that the Western framework for mystery almost always misses when it encounters accounts like the crying forest of Eket. It looks for fear, and when it does not find fear, when it finds instead a community that has organized its life around this knowledge calmly and practically for generations, it tends to assume that means the account is less serious, less real, more like folklore and less like fact. But the absence of fear in the Eket accounts is not an absence of belief. The elders of Eket do not whisper about the crying forest the way people whisper about things they half believe. They discuss it the way experienced farmers discuss the behavior of soil before rain, with specificity, with an absence of drama, with the tone of people describing something they have dealt with before and expect to deal with again. They know that something in those trees announces death. They do not know what it is exactly. They do not claim to. What they claim is the pattern, and the pattern has not failed them. Tonight, somewhere in the Eket region of Akwa Ibom State, the forest sits at the edge of a village that has been there for generations. The people inside those homes know its sounds the way they know their own breathing. They know the wind in the palm fronds. They know the calls of night birds. They know the frogs in the rainy season and the dry creak of the harmattan. And if, somewhere between midnight and the first suggestion of dawn, a sound rises from the dark, not wind, not animal, not anything that belongs to the living world, they will know that too. They will not go toward it. They will lie still, and they will count. 1, 2, 3. This is Echoes from the Bush, where the stories the world forgot have always been waiting.